Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. You know, I heard on the radio that today is supposed to be something of an important day, though I'm not entirely sure why. Is it perhaps a holiday? Is there a parade coming through? Oh no, of course not. Obviously, today is Election Day. And in the United States, it's basically a years-long event. Well, let me tell you right off the bat. I'm not going where you might think I am with this morning's briefing. First of all, this is not going to be some rant about whether you choose to vote or not. I'm not here to lambaste you or harangue you about that one, believe it or not. I'm sure that many of you who are listening to the sound of my voice right now, you're either on your way to the polls to vote early, or you'll probably be voting later today. There's plenty of local races that are completely legitimate for you to be casting a vote on. They have nothing to do with the presidency, and that's fine. When it comes to the political realignment that we're attempting to effect, I know that there's a lot of black people who are at various stages of their own personal political development and maturation. And of course, it's going to be complex as to when you go to vote and who you vote for and for what reason. Let me tell you something. When it comes to voting, a lot of people say you should do what your conscience dictates. That's what the white media puts out there. Got a lot of Negroes who reflect that line. They'll echo it. You should do what your conscience dictates. Do what you think is right. Well, we don't talk about conscience here. Not because morality doesn't matter, but because there's a time and place for morality, and there are also other issues that morality should have no bearing on. When it comes to talking about elections, which is to decide who gets what, we don't talk about conscience. Nobody else does that. None of these other groups are even worried at all whether the law that they're voting for or the lawmaker that they're voting for is going to be anti-black or not. All they care about is what are they going to get. So the same way that adults don't tend to use the word fair when talking about issues, we tend to use the word just or justice. When it comes to elections, we don't talk about conscience. We talk about intelligence. Rather than tell you to do what your conscience dictates, I urge you to do what your power dictates. In pushing for true black empowerment, we've made many strides over the years, but the last 4 I think have been particularly helpful, because what we've shown is that the issue of reparations is front and center, and also we've held Kamala Harris's feet to the fire on that one. And what we've proven is that we've got staying power when it comes to telling people what she's done and reminding them over and over again. That's important because this is something that the old dead black media didn't do, largely because they were on the take, but also because of the fact they didn't know what was in our people's interests. We haven't let people forget what Kamala Harris has done and what she's said, and that's the reason why people remember it. We wouldn't allow anyone to forget. Now, she can try to hide behind as many bootlicks and shills and suck-ups as she wants, and she's tried, but when she does that, she's validating that we've got her on the run. So for those of you who are planning to vote, you need to remember elections are not about right and wrong. It's about whether you're going to get something or not. And whatever it is, it has to be about your power. Elections are not some coalition building endeavor. Every other constituency out there understands that. They tell these politicians what they want specifically for themselves, and they never mention us at all. In fact, some of them go so far as to say that we should be shut out. You saw that in Los Angeles with those racist Latino city council members. And if the politicians refuse to do what these other constituencies want, if they refuse to make promises to their power, then they let them know you're not going to get any campaign money from us, no donations, and of course, no votes. You see, voting is not about conscience, because casting a ballot in and of itself is neither moral nor immoral. It's merely a civic exercise. But depending on whether you know what your interests are and are taking a hard line on those interests, voting can be intelligent or unintelligent. Do you know which is which? Well, you start off by studying yourself and learning what your interests actually are. Most people think that they know, but they really don't. They have some vague, vaporous idea that they can't really articulate. Now, once you actually take out some time to figure out what your interests actually are, then you start looking around to see if there's anyone on the ballot who's actually stood for those interests, not just claimed that they've done it, but has actually stood on business, your business. See, a lot of black folks don't actually take a look at people's records or even take a look at where these people have stood on the issues at all. And they actually don't even look at who it is that these people pal around with. That's how you wind up with the fiasco that we had in California when it came to reparations this summer. For those of you who may still be flirting with the idea of voting for one candidate or another today, I'm not here to talk you out of it or into it. I'm here to let you know that these are some thoughts that you ought to take with you into that voting booth. The outcome of today's election, in holistic terms, is not our top priority. Now, you'll ask, but wasn't the point of sitting out the election to send a message to the Democrats? Yes, and we've done that. When they began openly attacking black men in particular, with those angry, whiny rants, they were all going in, from Magic Johnson to Obama himself. When they did that, they acknowledged what we've been saying. They are very well aware of what we've been doing and the impact that we've been having on the black political discourse. They couldn't pretend that they didn't know about it. And what that means is we did something that finally reached the bastards. That was important, but it's not enough. Understand something. Withholding our vote has always been a means to an end, not an end unto itself. What is the end result? Ultimately, it's going to be a political realignment, which means that all these black voters who have been out here just voting for nothing, there's going to be more and more of us who are actually understanding we need to vote for something, and we need to know what we're going to vote for. It's long been said that politics is warfare, and that's exactly right. But it reminds me of this old rap song, Another Pig Bites the Dust, back in the day. One of the lyrics was, we need to pick up the gun, but before we pick up the gun, we need to know what we're fighting for. Elections follow the exact same pattern if you're doing it right. Before you go calling yourself picking up that ballot, you need to know what you're voting for. Let's be clear here. There was never going to be a scenario where the Democrats would do an about-face in this election cycle. They have been emboldened for decades now, particularly with the Obama administration. Even when he wasn't offering us anything. Obama came onto the political scene just dropping down from Mars because the Democrats plucked him from obscurity. But when he showed up, first thing he did was to insult the black community and to praise white society. And he continued to insult black people during his first term. And what did black voters do in retaliation for this unprecedented disrespect? We turned out in massive numbers for him in 2012 and gave him a second term. We rewarded him for his anti-black behavior instead of punishing him and making him a one-term chump. When we did that, we gave the Democrat establishment all the encouragement and reassurance they needed that they could spit in our faces with impunity, and that's exactly what they've done. Obama left office 8 years ago, but the memory of how we allowed him to insult us to our faces repeatedly, to single us out for abuse, and then reward him for it, well, that's something the Democrats have remembered. And it's in the back of their minds whenever they deal with us, and they're insisting that we take this abuse with a smile. A lot of people didn't understand why I and others in the New Voices of Black media made it a point to excoriate Obama, to call him a failure and a criminal against black empowerment, not merely for his refusal to do anything for us even though we put him in the White House, but also for the fact that this guy went out of his way to show us he was going to produce for anyone and everyone except for us. He was actively trying to set us back, and that's exactly what he did. If you're deciding that you're going to vote, not just this election cycle, but any election cycle at all, I don't know what's in your mind as you decide to walk into that voting booth, but whatever it is, it better not be a lie. Now, if you want to say that reparations may not be on the ballot, but policies that will curtail these racist immigrants and inflict penalties on them is, so I'll take what I can get, okay, I can understand that. But what I would tell you is don't make too much of it. Don't try to convince yourself that you're voting for other things that are not actually on the ballot. Be honest with yourself. That's the point. Now, as far as the Orange Man goes, he's had a number of indictments against him, and they're trying to create a talking point for the election. Even if Trump had defeated all of these suits against him, and given the sheer number and the law of averages, there's no way that was going to happen. Given how many they are, it'll take years for these things to wind their way through the courts. So this would still be an active issue come election time no matter what. But look, the election year jockeying aside, neither of these self-interested narcissists have said a peep about what they're going to do for black empowerment. They pay lip service and that's it. Hell, Trump's former right-hand man, Steve Bannon, got out of the hoosgow recently, and I couldn't help but notice in his post-release press conference, he's sitting here name-dropping black and Latino inmates that he was locked up with. So both sides of the political aisle like to name drop us, but only for the sake of manipulating us. Be honest about that. Trump could have easily hammered Kamala Harris relentlessly about how she put black people in prison, even ones who were innocent, and how he was letting at least one or two of them out. But you see, both political parties are determined to keep us out of sight, out of mind. So when it comes to their interest, we should do the same. And the only people who are offended or scared of that prospect are the ones who are desperately hoping to get an administration job, either from Kamala Harris or Donald Trump if he gets back in the White House. Shills are going to shill, after all. But we shouldn't be one of them. A lot of Negroes in California were under the illusion that their black state representatives were on their side, were representing them. 15 years ago in my classic video, We're All Detroiters Now, I warned you that black people are way too eager to be grateful to politicians for merely doing their jobs. And I told you to never thank a politician just for doing their job, because that's what you pay them for. Your paycheck to them, and not to mention all the money they're taking from the government, that's thanks enough. But we've gone way beyond merely giving people too much thanks. We imagine that they're standing up for us even when they never have. A lot of shills, plants, and agents, usually being paid by these corrupt sellouts, they've been carrying water for white power, and they lied to us and told us that all of these corrupt and crumbling misleaders were representing us and doing all this stuff for us. But this summer, when reparations was up for a vote, black Californians found out just how bad the rot in the wood was. And it stands as a signal event and a lesson to us all. You know, after the end of chattel slavery, we actually had managed to put together a proper political infrastructure for ourselves. It wasn't the most powerful, but at least it worked, and it actually functioned in our interests. Now, we abandoned that so we could go ahead and chase the old white whale of whether or not we were going to get in go in massa again, i.e. integration. And in the process, as Dr. John Henrik Clarke put it, we integrated ourselves right out of what little power we had managed to amass. It's time for us to rectify that mistake. We will have to reestablish a proper political infrastructure from scratch. That's the bad news. Now here's the good news. We've already begun by cultivating the mentality that the code is the leader. We don't care what some politician or candidate says. If their words are not in line with the code, or they refuse to embrace and promote the code, then they don't get our vote. It must be as simple as that so that everybody understands exactly where we stand on the issues. So that they can't be coming up in front of us and saying, I've got a plan for black men. Well, what's your plan for black men supposed to be? Well, I've taken a few of these grab bags from my general party platform and I put black in there and here's some weed and we're going to do a little bit of enforcement for crypto. That's not what we told you to do. What the hell's the code got to do with marijuana and crypto? Keeping things simple also keeps us focused. That's good advice if you're trying to get your power back like we're doing. So I'm going to go ahead and close out this morning's briefing. As for me, you already know what I'm doing. I'm voting for the couch 2024, 2026, or whatever else they got. Because black empowerment is not on the ballot, but the next step must be to make sure that it is. It's not enough merely for us to refrain from voting for a system that hasn't produced for us. Part of putting together a proper political infrastructure means that we're going to get in the game. And I've been repeating that just for the folks who don't listen so well. Nobody has ever said we're going to be staying on the couch. What we've been saying is as long as black empowerment isn't there, and as long as we have not had sufficient infrastructure and organization to get it on the ballot, then it makes no sense to be voting. But we're going to remain active. It's time for those changes to take place. Withdrawing from these phony political choices that we're presented with is the first step. The next step is creating a choice of our own. And don't expect any of these shills and bootlicks and suckers who have been out here being all enthused about you need to vote for Kamala, or the other ones who are like, that's why I'm voting for Trump. Don't expect for them to be excited about the prospect of you having your issues on the ballot. They're not going to get excited about that. Their job is to get you excited about voting for what's in their interest, not yours. It's way past time that we wised up. And as people get angrier with us as we come into our power and stand on business, that's going to be the surest sign that we're on the right track. All of this whining and griping and finger wagging at black men, I look at that and say, good. That lets me know we're heading in the right direction. The angrier they get, that means that we're not obeying. We are directly confronting them with the prospect of black empowerment, and as a result, we are threatening them with the end of white supremacy. And you know what? As far as I'm concerned, that's the only thing worth voting for. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. R. Laz, Cornell Sly, Benson Manento, Ty Banks, and Mark Jefferson. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.